Good evening and happy Halloween, everyone. I'm your host, the Top Banana, Evan Claymar, and tonight, in the spirit of my final spooky season with Sounds of the Valley, I'll be closing out my trilogy of bone-chilling Halloween info dumps. For the past 2 years, I've regaled you with what were surely incredibly terrifying genre deep dives. However, lately, I've been preoccupied with what's possibly the scariest kind of music there is: bad music. What an enigma bad music is. What compels someone to release it? Who would choose to listen to it? And what is it even that makes it bad? Bad music isn't a genre. It doesn't have defining characteristics. It just is. No one strives to make bad music, but it comes out all the same. It's like a ghost in the machine, silently infecting their work with some invisibly repulsive quality. And that's a spooky enough thought by itself. But even scarier is the fact that it can happen to anyone. Even huge, successful artists with storied careers can put out bad music, and that bad music can in turn be their undoing. Tonight, I wanted to take a look at artists who ruined their careers by putting out some of the lowest dregs of musical refuse that the world has ever seen. This is Evan's spookiest, mysteriest hour. Now, before we start, there are a few caveats to what constitutes quote-unquote career-ending music. First, of course, is that it needs to be career-ending. This doesn't have to mean ousting the artist in question from the medium of music entirely, but it does have to mean a permanent detriment to their reputation, an effective squandering of all the goodwill they had built up with their audience over the years that they spent releasing good music. Whether that means getting dropped by their label or becoming a punchline among the public, it has to be clear that things will never be the same with them again. For this reason, we won't be discussing albums like Rebirth by Lil Wayne, Speedin' Bullet to Heaven by Kid Cudi, or half of Weezer's discography, because each act here, regardless of how bad their respective album was, managed to hold on to enough goodwill with their audience to eventually come back to a place of relative respect. That can't happen here. There can't be any going back. Career ended, reputation ruined, done and dusted. On the other side of the coin, in order for someone to ruin their music career, they need to have actually had a music career in the first place. All the albums we'll be covering in earnest here were preceded by music that was at least pretty popular and by some metric pretty good. I'm not necessarily a fan of all of them, but they did all have many, many fans, and the taller they stand, the harder they fall. That does unfortunately exclude such heights of trash as Visionland by SoundCloud one-hit wonder YBN Nahmir, Angelic to the Core by disgraced former child actor Corey Feldman, and Paula by perpetually smug Hollywood Nepo baby and punching bag for the American legal system, Robin Thicke. Truly tragic that we have to save this triumvirate for another day. But that still leaves us with 3 harrowing tales of artists once at the top of the world who had it all come crashing down. Whether from pride, from hate, or from misplaced hope, they all ended up engulfed in the creative abyss all the same. Let's begin. Our story begins in London, England in the early 80s, where the band currently tearing up the scene was a scrappy punk band called The Clash. Now, The Clash weren't the first punk band, nor were they the best or even the most controversial of their time, but they did have a secret weapon that put them far above their contemporaries: mainstream appeal. Ever since their debut record in 1977, the band's co-founders and co-songwriters Joe Strummer and Mick Jones had experimented with combining the British punk sound of the time with elements from reggae, ska, and funk, genres that were all becoming massively popular across the UK. The result was them becoming absolute breakout stars in their home country, adopting the incredibly humble moniker, The Only Band That Matters. By the end of the 70s, they were one of the foremost bands of not just the British punk scene, but the British music scene at large. In 1980, their double album London Calling would top the charts in the US too, officially establishing The Only Band That Matters as international stars. By the mid-80s, when their latest album Combat Rock was certified double platinum, The Clash were truly at the top of the world. And that, of course, is when it all started to unravel. After Combat Rock's release, there was a major feud behind the scenes between the 2 songwriters, Joe Strummer and Mick Jones. Strummer, simply put, thought that all the fame had gone to Jones's head. He had started behaving like the stereotype of an entitled rock star, showing up late to rehearsals, refusing to play when he was in a bad mood, and overall just being a little menace to the rest of the band. Jones, meanwhile, thought that Strummer was trying to wrest all of the band's creative control away from him. This came to a head in 1983 when Jones was dismissed from the band. Just like that, half the creative force of The Clash was gone. It left a very big question in the air. Strummer had always been the one to write the lyrics, and Jones the one to write the music. With Jones gone, who would write the music? The most obvious choice was Strummer, and this was certainly what he himself had planned. However, someone else had a different idea. That someone was the band's manager, Bernie Rhodes. When it came time to record the band's next album, a power struggle ensued between Strummer and Rhodes over what direction to take it in. Strummer wanted to return to a classic punk sound, free of the reggae and ska influences that had defined the Clash's music up to that point. However, Rhodes had his eye to the new technology of the time: synthesizers, drum machines, and samplers. The two continued to fight throughout the entire recording process, but in the end, Rhodes got his way by stealing the album's master tapes from the studio and making his own edits to them as he pleased. He replaced almost all of the live instrumentation with synths and buried the entire mix under muddy samples from TV shows. He was even the one to give the album its name, Cut the Crap. And cut it they did, as the album was released on November 4th, 1985. The immediate response to the album was catastrophic, from both the UK press and the general public. It was recognized by Consequence of Sound magazine to be, quote, one of the most disastrous albums ever released by a major artist, end quote. Rhodes' changes were immediately noticeable, and not in a good way. Strummer's voice was buried so low in the mix that it could barely be heard over all the blaring samples and studio effects, and the synthetic layering over every song made the entire album sound like it had been microwaved next to a metal spoon. The critics in both the US and UK were united in their pointing and laughing. So what did the Clash do? Well, there was only one thing that could be done. Only a few weeks after the album's release, Joe Strummer publicly disowned it, and a few short months later, he officially dissolved the Clash. They have never had a reunion tour. One of the biggest and most well-regarded bands of their time, undone in an instant. Truly tragic. But let's move on, shall we? They're hardly the only ones who found themselves undone by the curse of bad music.
I got a funny feeling there's something wrong today.
The stage this time is the late 80s, and the reigning sound is the insidious scourge of hair metal. Bands like Def Leppard, Dokken, and Motley Crue are reaching the height of their popularity. But truly, no one made waves quite like Guns N' Roses did in 1987 with their debut album, Appetite for Destruction. Led by the 5-octave spanning vocal talent of Axl Rose, their singles Welcome to the Jungle and Sweet Child of Mine exploded onto radio stations across the country, gained massive traction after being introduced to the rotation of videos on MTV, and have since become essentially rock standards. Some of those hallmark pieces that have been widely accepted into the greater rock canon and will still be plinked out on guitars for decades and decades to come. Appetite for Destruction was certified 18 times platinum, becoming the most successful debut album in US history. However, in the years after its release, Guns N' Roses put less focus on their studio output, by instead going on one of the longest and most attended concert tours in history. Between 1991 and 1993, the Use Your Illusion tour saw GNR, along with their 130-member road crew, play 192 shows in 27 countries to an audience of over 7 million people. The band was truly too big to fail. After the tour wrapped up, they released The Spaghetti Incident, a short assortment of cover songs that sold fine and was received fine. No matter, said Guns N' Roses. This was nothing more than a quick snack meant to tide you over until our next big release. Just you wait. And so, the world waited. The driving force behind the downfall of the Clash was spite. This time, our antagonist is pride. Axl Rose, even in GNR's glory days, was known just as much for his colossal ego and self-righteous media rants as he was for his vocal talent. Many of the shows on the Use Your Illusion tour were cut short by Rose throwing tantrums on stage, verbally attacking the audience, the crew, or his bandmates. When it came to the recording of the band's next album, the song remained the same. According to his bandmates, Rose ran the band like a dictatorship, refusing to entertain any idea that wasn't his own. If someone contested Rose's opinion too hard on anything, he would fire them. Between 1994 and 1997, Rose fired every single member of the band's original lineup except Duff McKagan, the bassist, who ended up leaving the band of his own accord anyway. Guns N' Roses was a one-man show, and that one man was determined to keep it that way. Over the next several years, studio sessions consisted of a rotation of guest instrumentalists who never stuck around for very long. These guests included electronic musician Moby, Nine Inch Nails guitarist Robin Fink, and center for the Los Angeles Lakers Shaquille O'Neal. Supposedly, Axl Rose and his ever-shifting gang recorded over 300 hours of material during this time, with only fragments of it ever seeing the light of day on the final record. The world was still waiting for that record, by the way. They hadn't heard anything from the band in an official capacity since 1993. The unbelievable hype that Guns N' Roses had generated in their prime was fading. However, this tide changed in 1998 when the band's manager announced to the public that a new album was on the way, with an expected release date in 1999. In an interview, Axl Rose revealed the title of that album, Chinese Democracy. Well, 1999 came and went, as did 2000 and 2001. Trends rose and fell in the world of rock at large. Grunge gave way to post-grunge, gave way to nu metal, gave way to indie rock revival, all while GNR toiled silently in the background. At long last, on November 23, 2008, 15 years after their last album, Chinese Democracy was released with a purported total budget of $13 million, making it the most expensive rock album ever recorded. So, were these $13 million well spent? I'm sure you can guess the answer. After the 15-year wait left any remaining hype dead in the water, Chinese Democracy dropped with all the thunderous impact of a soggy whoopee cushion. The actual music was immediately and decisively overshadowed by the mythology of its 15-year development. That's not to say the music was good, though. The consensus opinion at the time was that, above all, it sounded dated and overproduced, the very emblem of a legacy act continuing long past their time. To no one's surprise, throwing obscene amounts of money at the music did not, in fact, make it any better. The album's release turned critics into creative writers, which is never a good sign for a band that wants their music to be taken seriously. Prefix Magazine wrote, quote, Chinese Democracy plays like a Frankenstein's monster mashup of the disparate points that made Guns N' Roses alluring in the late 80s. Rose tries to shoehorn all of those elements into every song, making the album feel like many warmed-over concepts rolled up in one terrible-tasting confection. I would liken it to a deep-fried Twinkie with a corn dog in the middle. End quote. Harsh. The world had turned and left Guns N' Roses behind. Though they have toured since then, it seems their time in the studio and in the spotlight is over.
Peanut butter jelly with a baseball bat. Peanut butter jelly with a peanut butter jelly. Y'all ain't ready for the jelly, it'll break y'all back.
Our last story has no grand antagonist, just changing trends and a goofy guy who got just too goofy for his own good. In the early 2010s, Chance the Rapper stood out from his crowd of #rap contemporaries through the lighter and sometimes sillier style of both lyricism and delivery. His bars often had punchlines meant to catch the listener off guard, and he punctuated them with his signature ad-libs, screams, jeers, and various noises that sound playful and almost childish. Across his trilogy of mixtapes, 10 Day in 2012, Acid Rap in 2013, and Coloring Book in 2016, Chance refined and codified his style in a way that defined him as one of the most unique hip-hop artists of his generation. These mixtapes didn't propel him to quite the level of stardom appreciated by the artists we've discussed earlier, but he settled into an easy pocket of fame where it seemed like everything was truly coming up Chance. In 2018, he announced his very first studio album, The Big Day, meant to be a culmination of all the good vibes Chance had absorbed over the years from both his fan base and his newlywed wife. The album's production went smoothly, all things considered. The studio sessions weren't marred by any major interpersonal drama. When the album finally released on July 26, 2019, there wasn't any indication that it should be anything other than a solid collection of good time summer anthems. We were, truly, all so naive. Although received fine in the press, The Big Day was absolutely slammed online, especially on social media. The lyrics were criticized as a mix of nonsensical word salad and humor that just did not land. Chance had unfortunately just gotten too silly, and on an exhausting 77 minutes of runtime, it was a mess that just kept going and going. Any credibility that Chance had built up in the hip-hop landscape had evaporated in the July sun, and he did not release or feature on any new music for the next several years. Career ended, reputation ruined, done and dusted. Or was it? Years after The Big Day released, no one expected Chance to make a serious comeback, but this year, he released Starline, a follow-up not to The Big Day, but to his earlier trilogy of mixtapes. And a move that surprised just about everyone, Starline proved to be a mature, self-aware return to form for Chance that may not have completely rebuilt his reputation in the hip-hop landscape, but it did open the conversation back up just enough for him to be regarded as, once again, a unique and respected member of the scene. Whether he continues this trajectory, it's too early to tell, but the possibility is there. As he asserts in the opening track of Starline, I had a F-, but that's behind us. And maybe that's all a message we can learn from. Maybe there's no mistake too great to recover and grow from. Maybe hope can be the guiding light that protects us from the scourge of bad music. And maybe it can help us too take a F- and put it behind us. Thank you for tuning in to this special episode of Sounds of the Valley. You can check out our other shows at mytv10.uwec.edu or on our YouTube channel at UWEC TV10. I've been your host, the top banana, Evan Claymar. Until next time, may your dreams be sweet and may your nightmares be spooky monster scary and not grandma died scary. Good night, y'all.